welcome back to All Things Lord of the Rings with your host Alex, also known as Solanus Dracone. Quick shout out to Uranus633, who on his own initiative went and shared me on the Tolkien fans Reddit. You, sir or ma'am, as the case may be, are awesome for that. I got quite a few subs from it. Thanks. Last week, Maedhros and his brothers, with Fingon, got together one last great mustering of forces to try to take on Morgoth in one big final battle. They had a good plan, but Morgoth's plans were gooder, and the Dark Lord managed to foil it all. His captain on the western front managed to goad Fingon's forces into attacking early, and cut down a large part of the effort from the west. That's where we are. Fingon's army was in retreat, and Haldir, one of the other great lords of the humans, was slain, along with a majority of the men of Brethil. There was a brief moment of hope when Turgon's forces finally managed to catch up, and they managed to cut their way through to Fingon and Hurin, the latter of which, as I covered in Part 17, was already good friends with Turgon, since he and his brother Huor were brought forth to Gondolin by the Eagles, and they were happy to see each other again. Then Maedhros managed to bust through from the problems in the east, and for a moment it all looked like things would finally turn in their favor. But then Morgoth just let it all rip. Every single one of his evil forces poured out, with orcs and wolves and orcs riding wolves and balrogs and dragons, including Glaurung, and yet still, the elves would have triumphed if not for the treachery in the hearts of some of the humans. One of these swarthy men who came out of the east way back when was Ulfang, who, with his sons Uldor and Ulfast and Ulwarth, rode under the banner of Caranthir the Shit-Talker in this battle. He turned traitor at this point, and attacked at the back of the Sons of Fëanor, having been laying as a sleeper all these years for just such an opportunity. This turned it into a battle on three fronts for the forces of Maedhros, and Ulfang's forces were bolstered by other evil men who showed up, and even though Ulfang and his boys were killed, the treachery managed to break Maedhros' forces. All of the Sons of Fëanor managed to escape the battle, wounded but alive, but they were out of the fight. There was one portion of the eastern forces who managed to make a big last hurrah when the dwarves of Belegost managed to take Glaurung out of the battle by forming a ring around him and beating at him with their massive axes, which were strong enough to make good dents in Glaurung's armor. Their king, Azaghal, was extra ballsy in this regard, but Glaurung knocked him down and crawled over him, crushing the dwarf, but not before Azaghal drove a knife into the dragon's soft underbelly. This knackered the big dragon, and he and all his children turned and fled. The dwarves of Belegost were done at this point, and they bore the body of their king on a slow march back home, officially no longer giving any fucks. On the western front, a massive tide of enemies rolled up on Fingon and Turgon, led by Gothmog, Lord of the Balrogs. He managed to split up the forces of the two elven lords, and cut his way through to Fingon himself, and the two squared off. In the middle of the fight, one of the other Balrogs tripped Fingon up with a whip, and Gothmog split the Elven King's head with his axe, and they all stomped on his corpse until it was paste. Thus passed the last High King of the Noldor. Now it was Turgon's turn. Hurin, seeing that everything had gone to hell, turned to Turgon and was like, "You are the last hope of elves. Run. As long as Gondolin stands, Morgoth will still know fear in his heart." And Turgon was like, "We're not going to stay hidden for long, though." And Huor was like, "If you keep going a little while, the prophesied hope of elves and men will come out of your walls. I know I'm going to die here. Make it count." And so, taking Hurin's advice, Turgon left the battle. The men of Dorlomin and the remaining forces of Hithlum made a valiant last stand until only Hurin remained. Though he gave a good account of himself, killing like 70 trolls of Gothmog's guard, but they stomped him down and actually took him alive on Morgoth's orders. And so ended Nirnaeth Arnoediad, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, when the last valiant attempt by elves and men to bring the battle to Morgoth failed. Morgoth was pleased. He had won the battle, and in a fashion after his own heart, the turning point having been the treachery of Ulfang, where humans betrayed their own kind and the elves. And the elves no longer trusted humans at this point, except for the three major houses of Beor, Haleth, and Marach. The realm of Fingon was done, and the Sons of Fëanor scattered like leaves to the wind. Morgoth sent in Easterlings to pen in the remaining humans of Hithlum, and the traitors got to rape and pillage as their reward. The elves of Hithlum were hauled off to the Dark Lord's mines and forced into servitude for the rest of their days. Morgoth owned the north now, and orcs and wolves roamed it freely, boldly cutting southward in places, mainly in Osiriand. The people there fled to Círdan the Shipwright in the Havens in the west. There they held out for about a year before Morgoth sent his forces there and lay the Havens in ruin. Círdan and his people, along with Gil-galad, the son of Fingon, managed to sail to the Isle of Balar, and that at least was a haven for anyone who could make it there. Turgon heard about this, and made a plan with Círdan to send some ships to the west, because they were clearly outmatched and needed the help of the Valar. Only one of those ships returned, and that was before it even got very far. They ran into storms just off the coast of Middle-earth, and only one elf, and presumably his crew, made it back, because Ulmo took pity on them. This elf's name was Voronwë, and he was one of the messengers Turgon had sent from Gondolin. So now, with only Doriath and Nargothrond remaining strong, because the Dark Lord either didn't know about them or didn't care just yet, Morgoth turned his attention on Gondolin. He knew that Turgon was now technically the last king of the Noldor, and that the House of Fingolfin had Ulmo's backing. He also remembered the wounds that Fingolfin had inflicted upon him. He also feared Turgon the most, because Turgon still had that fire and fury of old in his eyes, and Morgoth knew that something bad was still to come from Gondolin. He just didn't know precisely what. So the Dark Lord decided to do something spiteful. He had Hurin, who was still Turgon's good friend, brought before him, and tried to break the man. Hurin held out like a badass, flinging back some shit talk. This rightly pissed Morgoth off, so he had the man set on a chair on top of Thangorodrim and forced him to remain sat there, by power of his evil will or some shit like that. There the Dark Lord said, "Since you are going to mock me, sit right here and look out on the lands where evil and despair will come upon all those you love. I place a curse now on you and your family, that sorrow will come to them, and you're going to get to watch it all, because I'm going to let you see everything that I see and hear everything that I hear until the end of your days." Because he was Morgoth and he could do that kind of shit. As his last act of atrocity in the whole affair, Morgoth had all his servants gather up all the thousands and thousands of dead bodies from the war and pile them in the middle of Anfauglith into a great big hill that could be seen for miles and miles around. The elves named it Haud en Dengin, the Hill of the Slain, and Haud en Nirnaeth, the Hill of Tears. But the hill itself seemed to defy Morgoth, as it was the only place in all of Anfauglith where grass grew, and none of the Dark Lord's servants ever walked there. And so we end on that downer. The forces of the Sons of Fëanor finally shattered, the lands of Hithlum overthrown, and only the hidden kingdoms of Doriath, Nargothrond, and Gondolin left to the elves to defend themselves. Please remember to like, subscribe, and or leave a comment to let me know how you feel. Once again, I am Alex, also known as Solanus Dracone, and this has been All Things Lord of the Rings. Goodbye.